I ran out of my free 15 minutes on the first video, so here's the second part regarding Table 1 on page 34 of your lab manual, which is the area required to furnish given quantities of groundwater. We determined that you were interested in the first column, the pumping rate in million gallons per day. The third column is the recharge area in miles squared. And you'll notice that as the rate of pumping goes up from 0.2 million gallons all the way up through 1.0 million gallons, then the recharge area gets larger because more area is required to furnish that pumping rate. So what you're going to do in this lab exercise is calculate on a map what the radius of a circle will be for a recharge area at different pumping rates. So turn your attention please to page 35 and the map of Cliff Pond and the surrounding area. So in your lab manual on page 35, just under that data table, there are some instructions for you saying using table 1's data, which is the table you just looked at on the other page, plot the recharge area of a well on Lookout Tower on the map if it is pumped at a rate of 0.8 million gallons per day. So first of all, you need to look back at your table, and if, for example, in this example, it is pumped at a rate of 0.8 million gallons per day, you need to read across that table, across the line that says 0.8, to look at the radius of the circle that in miles. And you can see, if you look at 0.8, the radius of the circle that you'll need to draw to mark the recharge area is 0.58 miles, which we can round off to 0.6 miles. Now, if the instructions had said calculate the recharge area in millions of gallons per day for 0.4, you would have read across to the radius of the circle and seen that the equivalent was 0.4 miles. So now let's turn your attention to the diagram. First of all, Lookout Tower is right here. So you want to put a nice good sized dot on there so you can see where Lookout Tower is. Then you need to look at the scale on the map. So you can see that the top line here, the scale here, is in miles. This is the 0 mile point, this is the 1/2 mile point, and this is the 1.0 mile point. So you'll notice that there are 10 sections to this scale. So if this is 0, this is 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, 0.4, 0.5, 0.6, the number we're looking for, 0.7, 8, 9, and 1 mile. So we were looking for a distance of 0.9. So if you have a ruler or any other type of straight edge, you can measure the different distance between here and here. That's your 0.6 miles. Then you go to your Lookout Tower, pretend you put a well there, and let's say your measurement brought you to, say, here. Put a dot here. Then move your ruler around to another 0.6 mile mark, put your point. Whoops, let's go back. And so forth. And you'll eventually get some dots that you can connect in a nice smooth circle. Okay? That is your recharge area, and it will go off your map. I mean, the map just doesn't have Lookout Tower right in the middle. So once you've drawn your circles, you need to look at potential sources of groundwater contamination within that well's recharge area. And you'll need to use a little imagination. But first, I'll give you a little background information on some of the pollutants that one might find anywhere with any body of water, and then you can go back and take a look and see what pollutants might be found in this recharge area. So first we will define water pollution and then look at some of the sources of water pollution. So water pollution is the contamination of streams, rivers, lakes, ocean, or groundwater with substances produced by humans that negatively affect organisms. Here on the Cape, nitrogen and phosphorus are huge problems. The nitrogen comes from different sources, but one of the big sources is the many septic tanks that we have. And when they leak, or their leaching fields aren't proper, then this nitrogen gets added to our water. Toxins that might be any chemical that might be harmful to us. In the case of Cape Cod, some of those toxins were introduced into our water through our percolating through our sandy soils and contaminating it. One of the more serious cases was the Otis Air Force Base, or the Mass Military Reservation down on the Sandwich Falmouth line there, and that can introduce toxins to water. Disease-causing organisms. We'll talk later in lab about things like cholera and other disease-causing organisms that can get into the water supply and make people sick. And we'll talk about an indicator, which is E. coli, or Escherichia, I can't say it, E. coli, which is a bacteria that may be used as an indicator to make sure our water is not polluted with human waste. Another consideration for water pollutants are heavy metals like mercury and lead that can get into the water. And some additional ones are oil, such as gasoline, pharmaceuticals that people flush down the toilet or that was in their urine stream and then makes it into their septic tanks and then makes it into the water. Pesticides that people use, say, on their lawn, or utility companies might use them to clear utility pathways, utility lines. So here are a few other water pollutants that you might not think about all the time, but one is solid waste, garbage just getting dumped directly into the waterways. Sediment can be a problem when sand, silt, and clay comes down, maybe as a result, for example, of deforestation and erosion, and that sediment can choke off the water, make it difficult for organisms to survive in that type of choked environment. You can also have thermal pollution, particularly from water used for cooling power plants. And thermal pollution can change the water near that power plant, the temperature of it, and as you know, we've talked about it before, how sensitive some organisms, such as fish, are to thermal pollution. And another consideration you might not have put on your list before is noise. When we have ships and things coming through and creating noise, it could interfere with species that communicate with noise, such as whales. So now that we've talked about some of the possible water pollutants, go back to your map on page 35 and look within your recharge area and imagine what types of activities may have taken place there that might possibly contribute to groundwater contamination. Please send me those results by email. Thank you. Okay, last but not least, we are going to talk about legislation which has helped to clean up and continue to protect our water. So our water quality is affected by or protected by two acts. The first was the Clean Water Act, which protects fish, shellfish, and wildlife and recreation in and on the water. And they defined acceptable limits of various pollutants in U.S. waterways, but this initial act did not include groundwater. So then in 1974, the Safe Drinking Water Act was enacted, SDWA, as was one of your assigned terms. The Safe Drinking Water established standards for our drinking water. And what they did was look at 77 different elements or substances that may be found either on surface water or in groundwater that's used as drinking water. and they set maximum contaminant levels, MCLs, maximum limits at which, if the water contained those exceeded those maximum contaminant levels, then that water would be in violation of the Clean Drinking Water Act, and the public would need to be notified. I do just want to mention here, as has been talked about in lecture, the Safe Drinking Water Act, which protects our public supply of water here on the Cape, for example, has actually more testing, more standards than bottled water. So if you're thinking you're getting cleaner drinking water by getting it from a water bottle, that's very possibly not the case at all. So, food for thought. So you will have a post-lab assignment for this lab, and it involves the drinking water standards. You are to go on to your computer and search for a water quality report for your town. And I want you to read it very thoroughly. I have a paper to set out exactly what you need to be looking for and understanding. I want you to read the background information, and I want you to look carefully at the table that lists the MCLs for a number of different elements or substances. Some of these have to be reported routinely, and some only have to be reported when there's a violation. Okay, so let's look at assignments. So as always, the best place to look for your assignments is on Moodle, and that's especially important now that we're not in face-to-face meetings right now. So I want you to sign on to Moodle to view your assignments. Some of the things that I have posted in addition to the screencast is a little video to watch, an article which is complex, but I think you can handle it, to read about Cape Cod's aquifer, and an assignment to examine your town's water quality. If you're not able to find your town's water quality report, I did post one from Falmouth, which is very well-written one that you can read. And if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to email me, and I'll do my best to answer those questions. Thank you.